Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, I Like to Cake. Today I'll be showing you how to make a dairy-free coconut cherry sponge cake. So the sponge cake is just a normal sponge cake, there's no dairy-free substitutions there. But for the frosting, we're going to do an Ermine frosting, also called a cooked flour frosting, and we do have some dairy-free substitutions there. And then the cherry component is just a cherry filling that you can use for cakes, and again, there's no dairy-free substitution there, it's naturally dairy-free. And I will link a separate video in the description on how to make the cherry filling. So let's get started. I'm going to start by showing you the frosting. So like I mentioned, this is called Ermine frosting or cooked flour frosting, and normally you'd make this with regular milk and butter, but we're going to substitute a canned coconut milk and shortening instead. The first thing we're going to do is pour in 1 cup of canned coconut milk into our pot. You could also use almond milk or soy milk or any other kind of milk substitute for the milk component of this. And then we're going to add in 1 cup of granulated sugar, 5 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, a pinch of salt, and then we're just going to mix this all together until it's combined before we turn the heat on. If you were to turn the heat on at this point, it's very likely that you would end up with a lot of clumps of flour and then you wouldn't have a smooth frosting in the end. So once it's all combined, we'll go ahead and turn the heat on to a medium heat and continue to stir this until it gets nice and thick and bubbly. Once we see that it's starting to thicken, we want to turn the heat down to a lower heat, just like a medium-low, or you can go all the way down if you feel more comfortable. The reason we're doing this is because we don't want the bottom to burn. It's just kind of an extra security blanket while we're stirring this. And we want to basically continuously stir this so that it doesn't stick to the bottom and burn, and also to help it cook evenly. After a lot of patience, it is now nice and thick, so we can turn the heat off and we'll transfer this to a separate container. I like to use something that's kind of wide so that this has more area and it can cool off a bit faster, because we need this to cool completely before we mix the shortening into it. Otherwise the shortening will just melt and we won't have a nice firm frosting. Now I'm just spreading this out so that it's a little more even, and then we'll cover this with some plastic wrap. And what the plastic wrap does is it prevents a hard skin from forming on the top as this cools down. You want to make sure that the plastic wrap is touching the whole surface of this mixture. You don't want it to just lay on top of the dish. And now we're going to finish the frosting. So we've got 1 cup of vegetable shortening here, and I'm using shortening as the butter substitute. You could also try a vegan butter for this. And we just want to soften this up and get it kind of smooth. Then we'll grab our cooled cooked flour mixture from earlier, peel the plastic wrap off, and then we'll be adding this just about 1 spoonful at a time, and then we'll beat it in between each addition. You don't want to add it all in at once because it won't combine very well, and you also need to be whipping a good amount of air into this. Once each spoonful is kind of incorporated, go ahead and add another spoonful and continue to whip it until you've used up all of the cooked flour mixture. Also, don't forget to scrape down the sides occasionally so that you can make sure everything gets evenly combined. Once you've added the last of your flour mixture, continue beating your frosting until it's really nice and light and fluffy. Also, don't forget to add vanilla, which I almost forgot to add, but we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla to this. And if you find that your frosting is kind of runny and it's not firming up, you can just throw it in the fridge for a few minutes and then bring it out and continue whipping it. That should firm it up just fine. So now we're going to make the sponge cake. We'll start with 5 eggs at room temperature, 120 grams of sugar, a pinch of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, And then we're going to whip this for a very long time until it gets really fluffy and airy. And this is what gives the rise to our cake. We're not going to use any baking powder or baking soda. All of the structure of the cake comes from the eggs. It's also really important that your eggs are at room temperature. This way they will whip up properly, otherwise it may take a really long time and they won't really whip up nicely. You also may have noticed that I gave the measurements for the ingredients in grams, so it is really helpful to have accurate measurements by using weight for this recipe, but I will put the cup measurements below in the description. Okay, we've been whipping for a long time now, and we're at the point where it's nice and pale looking. It's not just fluffy, it also looks pale in color. So we want to do what's called the figure 8 test. Lift up your beaters and draw a figure 8. If you can see the ribbon staying on top of the batter and it doesn't immediately sink into the batter, then it's ready. Now we're going to add our last ingredient. That's 120 grams of cake flour, or you can use all-purpose flour if you don't have cake flour. It's the same weight. And we just want to sift that in to make sure we don't have any clumps. Once it's all sifted in, go ahead and very gently fold all of the flour into your egg mixture. And you want to be gentle about this, and you don't want to over mix it, but you also still need to make sure that you get all of that flour incorporated. Don't forget to scrape the bottom and the very center at the bottom. I tend to find that I get a lot of flour stuck down there. Once that's all mixed through, we're going to take our prepared cake pan, and I've just buttered and floured this cake pan, and pour all of the batter in very gently. Try not to squash out any air. And the size of the cake pan that I have here is a 7 by 3 inch cake pan, so it's a 7-inch round cake pan, and it's 3 inches tall. Once you've poured all of the cake batter into your cake pan, go ahead and bake it in a 340-degree oven for 40 minutes or until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. Now we can start assembling and decorating. So as always, put a little bit of frosting down in the middle of your cake board. And then we're going to take one cake layer. So I cut the whole cake into 4 separate layers. And then we're going to pipe some frosting around the perimeter of this layer. This is basically going to act as kind of a dam to keep the fruit filling in so it doesn't spill out over the edges. You want to get this pretty close to the edge. We are going to press down and kind of squish it out a bit with the next layer, but you still want to be pretty close to the edge. Then go ahead and grab your fruit filling. So I have the cherry filling here, and I have a video linked in the description that shows you how to make this cherry filling. We'll just spread some of this out. And then we're going to go ahead and pipe a little bit more of our frosting on top of this and just kind of spread it out to evenly coat it and have like an even layer of filling. Then take your next cake layer and put that on top and press down on it a little bit. Then repeat what we did earlier. Do the frosting around the perimeter, the fruit filling in the center, a little more frosting on top, spread it out, cake layer, and then we'll repeat that one more time. And this is going to be a naked cake. So what that means is that the sides of the cake are exposed. It's not fully covered with frosting. So this is one style of cake decoration. It's a lot easier to do, and it still looks really nice in the end. We are going to do a little bit of decoration on top. So I have my Ermine frosting in a piping bag fitted with a 1M tip from Wilton. It's just a star tip. And then we're just gonna pipe some little swirls onto the top of the cake. And that's it. That is our dairy-free coconut cherry sponge cake. I hope you liked this video. If you make this cake or use any of the techniques in this video, Please send me your pictures. I'd love to share it in one of my future videos. You can email them to iliketocake.baker@gmail.com. Thanks for watching!